date is February 11th, 2026, and the time is 6 p.m. The first thing on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody stand up. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Third thing on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. And I'll make a motion. I, Ron Hanegraaff, move to approve the February 11th, 2026 City Council agenda.
Rob, second.
Rob seconds it. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. Jenny?
Jenny, aye.
Scott, aye.
Karen, I.
Rob, aye.
And Ron, aye. We'll go on to Section B, the consent agenda. I'll make another motion. I, Ron Hanegraaff, move to approve the February 11th, 2026 City Council agenda. Is there a second?
Scott, I'll second.
Motion's been seconded. Any other discussion or comments about it? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Jenny?
Jenny, aye.
Scott, aye.
Karen, I.
Rob, aye.
And Ron, aye. We'll go to item C, presentations and items for council's actions. We'll go to item number 1, the public forum. Is there anybody in the public that'd like to use the microphone?
Gonna have to muscle their way in if they do.
Anybody online that would like to make a comment? Hearing none, we'll close that section and we'll go on to item number 2, the Anoka County Sheriff's Office Quarterly Report and 2026 Deputy Introduction. Thank you for coming, Sheriff, with all your manpower there.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me? Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff. Thank you for having us. As you know, I'm Jessica Slavic, Lieutenant with the Anoka County Sheriff's Office and the liaison between our office and the City of Columbus. Tonight with me, we have Sheriff Brad Wise, Chief Deputy Bill Jacobson, Investigator Sean Merritt, and Deputies Grant Olson and Matthew Vertina. So we will do introductions to start with, and then I will turn it over to Sheriff Wise for a brief statement, and then we'll move into the fourth quarter report from 2025.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and start with Investigator Sean Merritt.
Hi, Sean Merritt. Been with the Sheriff's Office for 24 years, the past 13 years in investigations, that one including investigating Columbus cases. Prior to that, I was a field training officer and then taser instructor.
Hello, I'm Deputy Grant Olson. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 6 years, actually 7.5 years total, a year and a half of that being with as a CSO. Currently, I'm Patrol Division, and I am a field training officer, a use of force instructor, and a taser instructor.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, I'm Deputy Matt Vertina. Been a deputy for just over 2 years and 1 day, and worked in Columbus for about 2 years now too, and great to be here.
Thank you. So Grant and Matt are the deputies assigned to the Columbus contract for 2026, and then Sean Merritt investigates all of the felony level misdemeanor and gross misdemeanor property crimes in the city of Columbus. I will now turn it over to Sheriff Wise for a statement.
All right. Thank you, Lieutenant Slavic. Mayor, Council, I always get a kick out of hearing a deputy say, you know, I'm 2 years and 1 day, and I'm looking at you, Mayor, because when I think about when I started in law enforcement, it seems like only yesterday, but now today I'm at 31 years in law enforcement. I'm 28 for the city of Coon Rapids and the last 3 as sheriff of Anoka County. I'm sure you can relate.
Well, I got 30, but
yeah. But it seems like yesterday, does it not? Yeah, it feels like it wasn't that long ago I was you. That said, is that, of course, we're honored to offer the law enforcement contract to the city of Columbus. We aim to provide the best service that we possibly can. And I believe from where I sit, especially my experience working for a city police department itself, is that I know you get a lot of bang for the buck, and that our deputies are committed to serving the citizens both in terms of their calls for service and for traffic enforcement. I'm sure you hear a lot about it. It's everywhere, is that the issues related to people driving recklessly or ignoring semaphores or those sorts of things are things that are very important to us. And I assure you that our deputies are committed to providing the level of service that the residents of Columbus expect. And that I also want to reiterate to them is that we're always respectful of taxpayer money. We know how serious a job it is to levy the citizens for the services that you provide. And we aim to make sure that every nickel that we spend is money that's well spent on behalf of the taxpayers, because I want you to know or hear from me directly that that's very important to me too. That said, I thought I would maybe cover a couple of topics that I'm sure of interest. Is that for certain, immigration enforcement is an important issue, and I think you should get an update as it relates to Anoka County. As I've said every single time that I've been here, is that we work in law enforcement heaven, and we work in law enforcement heaven because we have city councils like you that we get to work with, that the citizens are very supportive. They understand the difference between lawmaker and law enforcer, and that we're appreciative of that fact. As it relates to immigration enforcement, the words sheriff and best practices and what the future is for law enforcement have been talked about plenty lately, especially as it relates to cooperation in terms of immigration enforcement. Is that I was fortunate enough to be part of a Zoom meeting with the Border Czar, Tom Homan, that was last week. And it was talking about how jails in Minnesota work with the federal officials as it relates to immigration enforcement. I want you to know from me is that we do our best to communicate and work as cooperatively as we can with the federal agencies that are responsible for immigration enforcement. There are limitations to what we're able to do that are based on lawsuits. You know, unfortunately, that's a lot of how life is navigated. And that said, is that we have excellent relationships with the with ICE and with immigration enforcement officials, because I have the fundamental philosophy, and I think most people do too, no matter what side of the issue that you're on, is that it's much better for immigration enforcement to take place at a jail than it is to take place at a front door of a home or at a business. And that anything that interferes with immigration enforcement taking place at a jail, in my mind, is a mistake. In that we're doing all that we can to cooperate. And that's not to say that there are other immigration issues that people are very passionate about, because I hear about it all the time too. I hear the both side-ism of it. But our aspect in immigration enforcement is to enforce the laws that exists. And I remind people constantly, if you don't like the laws that exist, please talk to your federal lawmakers and have the law amended. That's how the system works here in our country. Now, that said, Columbus, the city of Columbus, is vastly different than Columbia Heights, both politically and just the organization of the city. Columbia Heights has had, well, they're navigating a more difficult path than we are, and it's probably just mostly related to numbers. But for the cities that we police, the 8 cities that we call our contract cities that we provide our primary services for, is that we've had very limited interaction with ICE agents. Sometimes people do call and ask us when an ICE operation is taking place. I don't know of an operation that's happened in Columbus at all, but there have been a handful of them that have taken place within our patrol response area, and we've had 911 calls. The ICE agents that we've worked with, our deputies have worked with, have been very respectful, very cordial. It's very businesslike, which is truly the way the bulk of these incidents are going, you know, minus what you see on the news or what you see in Hennepin County. It's just a whole different place over there. Again, which circles back to the idea that we're blessed to be where we're at, is that it's just more of a, I don't know, it's an attitude of doing the things that we need to do in a manner that makes sense, that people can understand, and that we're respectful of people in the positions that we're in. But I just want you to know that philosophically especially, is that I hope that immigration enforcement takes place at the jail, and that the transfer or the people they need to take into custody, that's as streamlined as possible, so that these interactions that happen in neighborhoods and stuff are eliminated. And truthfully, that's all Mr. Holman asked of Minnesota sheriffs. So I wanted you to hear that from me. And then the other thing that I'll mention to you specifically is the jail. I know I talked about it last year, is that our jail is failing, and it's failing because the structure is falling apart, like pipes and concrete and all sorts of things, roofs. The building is just falling apart, and it's a big ticket item. It bothers me a lot that I keep saying the same things to you. I know I said virtually the same thing last year. The building needs to be replaced, and I wish I was telling you that a shovel's in the ground. But unfortunately is that the county, Anoka County, and the city of Anoka have reached an impasse, which has necessitated litigation regarding replacing the jail in the location, essentially in the location that it's at. And it's a big deal because every day of delay is taxpayer money that's getting spent. The county attorney and myself, and truthfully the county board, are very active in trying to move this project along as quickly as it can. Again, mindful of the taxpayer money, but we're going to move at the pace of the litigation, and I wish it didn't come to that, but it's seeming the only way that we're going to be able to build the kind of jail that we need to keep people securely in custody while they're going through the legal process to have their criminal charges heard. But with that, I think I'll close my comments unless you had some specific question.
I would just like to bring up a quick point about this DNR and the rifles.
Oh, yeah.
Could you just explain how the county sits on that?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. All right, so actually one of the conversations that I've had, I learned something new too. I always thought, or actually I'm going to backtrack for those of you who aren't following this story closely, but essentially the top 2/3 of Minnesota used to be rifle areas for deer hunting. The bottom 1/3 was shotgun only. I had operated under the assumption my entire life that that was for safety reasons, and apparently that was not true. The reason behind the difference was related to the deer populations, that deer hunters with rifles were more effective at controlling a deer population, and frankly, the state of Minnesota took advantage of the bad shots with shotguns, which allowed the populations to remain more stable or less culling of the herd. That said, is that I think it was last legislative session, is that the Deer Hunters Association went to the state of Minnesota and said, we can do rifle throughout the entire state of Minnesota without any loss of safety, because we all know that a rifle projectile flies farther than a shotgun projectile, although shotgun projectiles are a lot different in 2026 than they were in 1945 when the law was written that created that shotgun-only area. But the legislature agreed that the state of Minnesota should allow rifle hunting for deer throughout the entire state. There was a caveat in the law that said, however, individual counties are free to create an ordinance that would restrict or would continue to have it be shotgun only for deer hunting. So the conversation that took place within the county was basically to the cities, what do you want to do for your individual cities? Because some cities do have restrictive ordinances like Andover that say that there are no firearms allowed in certain areas. And for sure, Columbus would be allowed to address this issue in any way they chose to. But I do know the prevailing wind among the county commissioners, they haven't voted on it, mind you, but the prevailing wind was to not second guess the state, basically say that we're okay with deer hunting being rifle or allow rifles throughout the entire county, and that if cities wanted to create a more restrictive ordinance, they were welcome to do that. But that was that's where we left it. So there wasn't a vote taken, but based on a voice vote or based on comments that I've heard, is that it sounds like it's going to be rifles will continue to be allowed unless now Columbus as a city wants to take action otherwise.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question. So in other words, if we wrote our own ordinance, and I think I was talking to your deputy there, that chief deputy, that it would cover Carlos Avery too, because Carlos Avery's in our city.
Yeah.
So if we decided as a council to write an ordinance restricting just shotguns only, sticking to the same thing, then rifles would be out, it'd be illegal then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Well, actually, I want to add, I'm certain the kind of deer hunting that takes place in Columbus is probably from stands, which this is all stuff that, again, it's become more clear to me that if somebody's up in a stand deer hunting, that means they're shooting down, and that the experience, there have been a few other states that have had the shotgun-only rule in place. Again, it was related to deer management, not safety. And that states that have gone away from shotgun to allow rifles is that there's been no difference in the safety of residents. That the projectiles, again, generally are pointed down. It's not like up north where people drive deer, where they line up and move through a woods, where they're shooting a rifle from ground level. I mean, obviously that, I don't know the rural areas of Columbus well enough to know whether or not that would never happen, but my understanding is that there was no change in data from other states. North Dakota and Wisconsin were the two that were mentioned that went away from shotgun-only areas.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a discussion on that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you're welcome
we got
to
a lot of
discussion.
people that border Carlos Avery.
Yeah, and there,
A lot
and
of them would be a little more uneasy about having rifles. But you're right, shotguns.
yep. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, you are in, for sure, council, you're in a different predicament because you do have a very popular state park hunting space that abuts residential areas.
Anybody else have any questions for the sheriff?
No, I just say to your point, yeah, it is a unique area, and having family that own land, and it's not very uncommon to have structures struck by bullets. You know, it's just something you become used to. You don't make a police report. 20 years ago, my grandma was almost shot in her yard by a shotgun slug that hit her house. There's issues with that. I'm an avid deer hunter, but I think we will have to take a look at what that looks like. You know, rifle travels a lot farther. A shotgun goes about 250 yards now with a sabot slug, but a rifle can reach farther, right? So just thanks for bringing the context.
Thanks for allowing us
Yep,
to
yep.
understand what the county's doing. So,
Yeah, and for sure, Mr. Mayor, council, talk to your county commissioner about your concerns too, because it was basically a conversation a lot like this that took place last week at the elected officials update. It was a very informal conversation. They were definitely leaning towards letting cities do whatever it is that they were wanting to do. I know that Carlos Avery did get mentioned in particular, and a couple of county parks got talked about in particular that allow hunting. And that was going to lead to a little more skull scratching on the issue, for sure.
thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Other questions?
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Chief Deputy, do you have anything? Okay. Before we get into the fourth quarter report from 2025, I just wanted to give a few general updates from the Sheriff's Office. We have had and are continuing to have some personnel changes with some retirements. We had our Patrol Sergeant Tim Day recently retire with over 30 years of law enforcement experience. We also have Sergeant Rick Cryer with our Civil Division, who is retiring next month. And then in April, one of our Criminal Investigation Division detectives. So a lot of institutional knowledge and experience that's leaving. But with that always comes the excitement of promotions and developing new leaders. So the other update I have is we have a facility dog now, so I'm excited to share that. We welcomed Sedona to the Sheriff's Office a few weeks ago. She is a 3-year-old yellow lab and golden retriever mix, and she was given to us by Can Do Canines, so she was donated to us from them. Her handler is our victim advocate, Tristan Gillespie, and Sedona will be working with our crime victims and providing services to them. I will now draw your attention to the 2025 report that I've passed out. Specifically, we'll discuss the fourth quarter of 2025, but this does show a comparison from all of the calls for service and the offenses compared to 2024. So in looking at this, we did have 134 fewer calls for service in 2025 compared to 2024, but as you can see, still especially with our last quarter here, Columbus is a great place to live, very low crime, 0 burglaries. There was only 1 felony level person crime in this past quarter. There were 11 thefts in the last quarter, 2025. Quite a few of those did come from running aces. I think just the casino in general is kind of the perfect storm with people chasing their losses and dealing with some financial distress. Combine that with the crowds and the easy distractions, it makes it easy for somebody to snatch a purse off the back of a chair, or in one instance, somebody took $475 worth of chips from a poker table. The good news is that the casino does have really good surveillance. Investigator Merritt was able to identify a suspect in the theft of the poker chips, and she did admit to taking those poker chips, however, indicated that she thought that they were hers, and she was agreeing to return those instead of being charged with theft. The other theft out of Running Aces involved an intoxicated female taking a sweatshirt from the clearance rack, and then she put that on and left the casino without paying for it. So she was charged with misdemeanor theft and issued a trespassing notice. Some other notable thefts that occurred in the city of Columbus. We had one in December. We had a theft at American Auto Sales. The business was not the victim in this instance. However, a victim had purchased one of the vehicles from Marketplace, and then they had brought in an individual with them that he didn't know very well to drive that vehicle home for him. So when they got to the business, the purchaser finished the transaction, and then he provided the keys of that newly purchased vehicle to this individual, and then that individual was instructed to follow the owner back to his house in St. Paul. However, that individual got into the vehicle and took off at a high rate of speed, and the vehicle was recovered a month later on January 16th. So that case is still open for investigation. There was also a theft of at Camper World, Freeway Drive. There's an individual who was staying in a camper. While staying there, they also stole a TV out of the camper. There was damage totaling up to $6,000 into the interior of the camper. So that case is being looked into. And then on November 14th, there was a truck stolen off the lot at D&T Auto Repair. A couple days later, deputies then observed that truck on Highway 65 and 147th Avenue in Ham Lake. They attempted to stop the vehicle. However, the driver would not stop, and then they entered into a pursuit. That pursuit was eventually terminated due to the recklessness of the driving conduct by the suspect being in opposing lanes on Highway 65. Causing several vehicles to swerve and brake to avoid a head-on collision. So the deputies did terminate that pursuit. However, they did relocate the vehicle again at 181st and Highway 65, turning into Village Green Trailer Park. The suspect then fled from the vehicle. Canine track pursued, and with the use of a drone, they were able to locate the suspect on top of one of the mobile homes. That female suspect was taken into custody. It was confirmed that she had 6 warrants out of Hennepin and Ramsey County. She also was in possession of 5 grams of methamphetamine. So D&T was able to recover their vehicle, and then that suspect was taken into custody by our deputies a few days later. Moving on to assaults, there were 2 assaults in the last quarter. One of them ended up being a gross misdemeanor domestic involving intimate partners, where a large glass mug was thrown at the other person and struck him in the face. And that individual was arrested on the gross misdemeanor domestic assault. And then in October, there was a felony level assault and robbery of a person that occurred at Carlos Avery. The victim had met another individual on an online dating website. They met in Carlos Avery to look at the stars. Unfortunately, this was not a date, and it was a setup. While they were out in Carlos Avery, there were 3 masked individuals who approached the victim, held him down, struck him in the head, ribs, and groin area, stealing his vehicle keys and his cell phone. That case is currently active with our Criminal Investigations Division. Looking at the calls for service again, you see the damage for properties. There were 8 damage to property calls in the last quarter. There was a small string of vandalism to some mailboxes on Kettle River Boulevard, ranging from the 17800 block up to the 18400 block. Unfortunately, no surveillance or suspect information on those, and the mailboxes had just been replaced. And then in October, there was another damage to property call in which deputies responded to a road rage incident. One of the drivers ended up getting out of the vehicle when they came to stop and approached the other vehicle, damaging the side mirror and hitting that and striking it until it broke off. And deputies responded to that. So other than that, pretty, again, you can see that the crime rate's obviously really great. The calls of service are down a little. You can see that the traffic enforcement still remains pretty steady, as well as traffic arrest. With that, did you guys have any calls of you wanted to highlight? No? Yeah. Yeah, typically we do see that in the spring and the winter weather. We see an increase in the property damage and personal injury accidents, but you can see they're up quite a bit from 2024, but personal injury crashes are down.
This is Jenny. Was there an incident at Running Aces where there was an armed robbery, I heard, where somebody was held up as they walked outside by two ladies in a van?
I don't know much about it. Deputy Grover took a report of, Deputy Grover did take a report about a robbery. It was a phone call report. I'm vaguely familiar with it, but it was a past action phone call, so we didn't go out there at the time of the robbery.
I got a couple more details for that. So, sorry. So just from my memory, because I like to read through all the Columbus reports when I come back to work on my days off. If I remember correctly, it was one of those gold-silver scam type of situations where people at Running Aces were offering, hey, come look at these like silver gold bracelets, necklaces, jewelry. We'll give you a good deal. And then they ended up, when they saw she had money in her purse, they ended up pulling a gun and conducting an armed robbery. But of course, it was reported after the fact, I think by quite a good delay.
It was 2 days, I believe.
But that's something to be aware of, even at not just the casino, but people will try to defraud you, and it could escalate from there. So if it seems too good to be true, it probably is.
There was another incident very similar to that at Love's Truck Stop in October where a couple approached a woman they had a baby with them and they were trying to sell their gold wedding rings, saying that they needed a place to stay, they needed food. And so she did end up purchasing those for $500 and later learned that they were fake gold. So yeah, the scams continue.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and Jen, I can look into the one from recently at Running Aces and get back to you with that.
Yeah, I had only heard because I had a resident, and then I had kind of looked up some information about it, and so that was the only reason that I came to my memory, and so I was just curious if there was any follow up on that. Yeah. So I appreciate the update on it.
And then looking at the next page.
Could I I have a question about the accidents before we get too far about that. So is it still typical for us to assist the state patrol on the interstate with accidents? And if so, is there any idea how many of these PI and PD accidents are actually on the interstate rather than city or county roads?
I do not have specifics regarding the location of where these happen, but I can most certainly get that information for you and determine how many are Interstate 35 versus the county roads or side roads.
More curious than anything, don't go to any trouble, but.
No, that'll be easy to pull. Location data. No problem.
This is Karen. I just have one question as well. I'm kind of new to the city council, so I need a little education. I see that the medical responses are quite up other than the traffic stops. I'm just curious as far as, how much training do our officers get for medical training when they have so many calls like that? I'm just curious, do they get a lot of training in the medical industry or?
For law enforcement in Minnesota, at least at one point before you graduate college, I believe, you have to make an emergency medical responder certification. That's the level right below EMT. I've maintained my certification for EMR throughout my career, and I think you have too, right?
They sent me 2. It's like every 2 years we get, I think it's an EMR refresher.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So it's not necessarily the official EMR because we are not required to keep that going because I think that's just more costs and whatnot. But yes, we get emergency medical responder training, which is it's like EMT and then the different levels of paramedic and whatnot. So certainly your life and death emergencies and basic oxygen, naloxone, that type of immediate interventions, and especially since deputies and officers are usually the first on the scene of a medical. So we can provide that life-saving care right away, and then paramedics and fire shows up to kind of tidy up a little bit and then take them to the hospital.
Do you want to share a little bit about the equipment?
Sure. We carry an oxygen tank, an AED, Narcan, gauze and tourniquets.
The rescue pump and the rescue pump.
Yep, more effective CPR with a actual like thing that sticks on the chest instead of just hands CPR. And there's also that the pod thing that I think controls the oxygen flow.
Yeah, it creates better chest riders.
Yeah, something like that.
That's
Better
good, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
And our fire department's really good.
Any other questions? Okay. I was going to point out that something that's new that you'll start seeing in the reports, we are now starting to track any kind of mental health related calls. I believe when I was here over the summer, I shared that we now have an on-site social worker embedded in our sheriff's office, working alongside deputies and responding to any type of calls that are mental health related or any crisis calls, any kind of community mental health issues from homelessness to substance abuse. So you'll see now that we are tracking the number of welfare checks, emergency medical holds, and any sort of mental health calls. So that's a new addition that you'll start seeing in the reports every quarter.
Real quick question, Jack. I probably catching you off guard, do we have any group homes?
Yes.
And do we get a lot of calls at the group homes? Okay, are they mental health ones? Okay. You have a regular one you seem to go to all the time?
I think this is public because it's on the DHS website. As far as my last checking, which is probably this summer, there's only one licensed group home in the city of Columbus. And we're there fairly regularly for mental health concerns. Doesn't always end in going to the hospital, but we respond there quite regularly.
So do you call an ambulance then too, or do you just call out for your mental health?
It depends on the nature of the call, and especially with mental health, it's just a private thing that we can't go too in-depth on. However, of course, when they reach that threshold of harm to self, others, or simply choosing to go to the hospital because they can still do that, then an ambulance would be called at that point, and we still stay on scene until they're transported or we come to a good conclusion.
Many times for us too, even when I wasn't working in the city of Columbus, I would come out every once in a while to help out. Oftentimes too, we're going out there and we're just hanging with the people until they are able to kind of self-regulate and calm down a little bit, so.
Do you think it's out of control, or do you think it's pretty moderate, or?
I definitely think that it's a community problem, the mental health issues within the community, but I just wanted to highlight too that, our deputies prior to getting the embedded social worker, that they are the first ones responding to these scenes. They do an excellent job. Part of the licensing cycle, all peace officers have to complete specific trainings related to this, so crisis intervention, mental illness, autism, conflict management, implicit bias training. So it really does prepare them for responding to these calls. And then the nice thing about having the embedded social worker is she's able to work alongside them and provide a little bit more long-term care and follow-up, and get them connected with resources in the community, so they can hopefully get them in the right direction and get them the help they need versus having to respond to the calls over and over again.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Otherwise, that is all I had prepared for this evening.
Thank you for all you do.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barry.
Yes, we'll see you in the
Wow.
spring for first quarter of 2026. Thank you.
The third item on the agenda tonight is proposal for City Hall needs analysis. Melissa Stein and Jonathan Luce, rural architects and engineers.
Mr. Mayor, the City Council has been discussing and planning for needed structural repairs and improvements to City Hall since 2022. Two reports were commissioned in October of 2024 and 2025 that outlined the major issues that need to be addressed to keep City Hall a functional facility. While these reports outlined issues with the existing roof and exterior wall components, their scope did not include recommendations for the overall needs of the building, cost estimates, or direction for renovation or new construction. We have reached the point where we need to either renovate this building or consider construction of a new City Hall. On February 5th, 2026, staff met with Wold Architects and Engineers, a consulting firm that specializes in public projects, to discuss a proposal for architectural services to address our facility needs. Wold will present a proposal to City Council tonight regarding the selection of options and the process for achieving the objectives of this project. So Melissa and Jonathan, I've worked with them in the past. They do have several projects that they've done in Anoka County and some of our neighboring cities. I think Melissa mentioned too, they've actually worked on a project with the Sheriff's Department, one in Forest Lake, City of Wyoming. So they're very familiar with these types of projects, and I will turn it over to Melissa and Jonathan.
I'll just give a brief introduction. Thank you, Jack, Mayor, Council, for having us here tonight. Our firm is purely like 100% public sector, and Melissa and I focus only on our sort of government work within Minnesota. So like Jack said, there's a lot of experience locally, but just throughout the state that we have when a city is looking at sort of facing these issues. And it's obviously pretty common because there's been some of your neighbors that have looked at replacement and renovation. And, you know, I think we've got a pretty robust process to help you kind of discover maybe what the right answer is for the city of Columbus. And hopefully by that point, you're able to kind of move into whatever project you need to kind of sort of keep on pace with what's been described as trying to sort of wrap this up by the end of the year. And I certainly think that's feasible. I think I'll let Melissa talk a little bit more about just the specific process that we might follow, and then open it up for questions from anybody.
Yeah. Mayor, council members, I think in your packets, you saw kind of a brief proposal of what we sent. It gives a little information, a little background about what we do as a firm. I think it also indicates kind of what we would consider our approach in this. And really, we're all inclusive. We want to make sure that whatever solution comes out of this in the end is one that you guys are happy with, and that, you know, your community is happy with. And that can have a multitude of different factors that go into that, right? There's a lot of different criteria that, you know, have to come together to make that solution. And we want to be here at the table with you as you do that. So we really start off by talking through what is that criteria? What are those objectives? You know, what are those things that we want to achieve? We know that it's assessing the building, but there might be other things that we want to get out of that. From there, we do talk to your users. So essentially the different departments, the people that are actually using the space, you know, we would want to talk to all of you, maybe in a workshop, right, to talk about the council chambers that you have here, as that would be something we would want to assess. We would look at your building in terms of infrastructure. So we know there's some structural issues of this building, but we'd also want to look at mechanical systems, electrical systems, technology, you know, looking at the age of your roof and your windows and all of those pieces that make up a building, but then also looking at your needs as you're kind of in a growing community. We're not saying you're growing tomorrow, but as we look that long term, and as you guys are thinking about an investment, we want to make sure it's the investment for that long term. And so we want to make sure that whatever approach you take really sets you up for that success as you grow and as your community grows. And so we kind of take all of those parts and pieces together, and with those we create different options. And they can be anything from, we just want to invest in this building and kind of do deferred maintenance, all the way to, you know, we're gonna, I don't know, build a grand, you know, building on the lake there or something, right? No. But we want to look at all the different parts and pieces and understand really what is the investment that we want to make, what does that long-term growth look like, and really what's going to set you up for success as a city and as a community as you grow. And then costs will be part of that too. And so we want to make sure, like I said, I believe, education is knowledge. And so for you guys to be able to make the right decision, you have to have all the facts and we have to look at that from different data points. And so our process really does that.
I think the only other thing I'll add is just from what you'll see from our firm, and certainly there's no limitation to how many times we might come and meet with you and look at different options. But I think just the sort of cadence of things is we'll come out and do our own investigations. We'll do those sort of meetings with staff, and then we'll come to council with probably likely at a workshop, just so that there's open discussion about some of the issues. We can talk about what some of our findings were from the existing building. We'll talk about some of the needs that exist, and so that might be deficiencies that we see today in the space, but also just what you might project into the future. And so those sort of things, once you find consensus on how to deal with those, that kind of springboards into generating some of those options. And so then that would be another, meeting with council to talk through some of those options. Typically, there's going to be some staff recommendations there that are alongside what our firm might see. And then at that point, you can sort of, if everything moves quickly, you can kind of say everybody coalesces around a single option and says, let's move forward. And at that point, you engage our services to start sort of design in earnest on a project to get it out to bid. So.
Yeah, and Jonathan had mentioned coming to council, but we know that the community is a huge stakeholder to this facility. And so we would be here to help support whatever that might mean in terms of getting that outreach and getting that community input too.
Any questions? I know a couple of us have sat down with you two already and listened to what they can do for us, but I think we all are on the course that something has to be done. We have to start somewhere, and I think my opinion is this is a place we start right now. So I see your cost is what, 4,500 or something. This isn't going to be like 2 months from now. You need another 4,500.
No, we're
Unless
all
you want to
in.
give it to us. We would say that's commensurate with kind of other studies we've done in terms of the number of buildings and square footage and things like that, and kind of the timeline that you're looking at as well. So
You're probably too far back. You can't hear the squeaking going back. Anybody have any questions?
This is Jenny. I did see that you obviously had noted that you worked with other cities around Columbus, so you're familiar with the area in general. So that was definitely a positive. And so thank you for working with the city on this. It's exciting, and I think a lot of us have been waiting a long time for it. So. I grew up some of us grew up in Columbus and have been in the city a long time, and this building looks exactly the same as I think when I was 4 or 5. So we're excited to see maybe a little refresh even.
And I'm your neighbor. I live in Forest Lake.
Yeah.
So.
This is Karen. Can I ask what was your last big project for a city? Which city was it?
I would say we have multiple projects going on at once. Currently, we're working with Forest Lake on planning their sort of public works project. We're also working with Wyoming on looking at renovation of a facility that they recently bought to relocate City Hall and renovate and expand their fire station. So those are sort of in design right now. I guess one that was completed maybe a year or so ago was the renovation of Blaine City Hall. So we did sort of an interior kind of remodel. A lot of that had to do with space needs too, and looking at what their departments needed and how to shift things around for the future.
We are currently working in East Bethel on kind of a similar, a similar aspect, but it's looking at all of their facilities and kind of, again, like you guys, they know they're going to be growing. So what does that long-term growth strategy look like, and how can we plan for that? So that would be one big one.
White Bear Lake would be a good one too, because that's, we just completed the kind of expansion of their fire station, renovation of police as well. So that's one that's, not too far from here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know it might not be great, but I know Jack mentioned it. We are actually working with the County of Anoka too on their jail project. So that's a fairly large project as well.
If it
goes, yep, as it moves forward.
Rob, you got it?
No, I'd just say I'm confident with the work you do in the cities you've worked with. I've walked a lot of these projects that you've done and designed and things of that nature. I've been helped with Jack and Jim on the preliminary, kind of being in the carpentry industry and looking at what we got going on. There's some major issues with this building, so I'm happy to get a professional opinion and get something moving forward, so, yeah.
So essentially with that, with your proposal, Melissa, could you just give us just a quick brief overview of what your deliverables would be and what the timeline is?
Yeah, so our deliverables kind of at the end of meeting with all of the individuals, kind of figuring out what that recommendation or what that solution would be is, I know Jonathan mentioned it, we would come to council, we would kind of get approval from council, but we would also create a report so that you guys would have that. Really, we believe that we can get this all done within, 2 months. We could probably work a lot quicker depending on how the solution piece is developed. That's where we actually see a lot of time because we want to create options, want to make sure you guys have time to think about them, that we can review them and then come back. So that's the piece that maybe takes a little longer. But within 2 months, we should be able to have a report that indicates all of the people we talked to, all of those different data points, all of that information that we've gathered, along with maybe all of the different options that we would be reviewing, and then a recommended solution, if there is one, with costs with those.
It sounds great. Any other questions, comments? Well, I'll make a motion. I, Ron Hanegraaff, move to approve the Wall and A&E proposal for facilitating planning and evaluation of options and their associated costs for the City Hall project at an initial cost not to exceed $4,500.
This is Jenny, I second.
We got a motion. It's been seconded. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Jenny?
Jenny, aye.
Scott, aye.
Aaron, aye.
Rob, aye.
And Ron, aye. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'll email you tomorrow, Jack.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Sounds good. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Go on to item number 4, waiver request, public right-of-way easement with 14561 Furman Street.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm about to bore you to death with land use and planning related definitions and hypothetical for you to consider. The applicant is requesting a waiver from the City of Columbus requirement that a driveway open to the public be encumbered by a 66-foot wide public right-of-way easement. The waiver is requested to allow the proposed use of a driveway for public access to avoid practical constraints associated with dedicating a full 66-foot wide easement across a site. The subject property is located at 14561 Furman Street Northeast, legally described as, and I'm not going to read that for you, and consists of approximately 8 acres owned by Chad and Heidi Lemire. The applicant proposes to divide the property into 2 parcels. The westerly parcel, approximately 5 acres in size and adjacent to Furman Street, would be conveyed for construction of a single-family residence. The easterly remnant portion of the property would be combined with approximately 20 acres of an adjoining 40-acre parcel under common family ownership, creating a single parcel of approximately 23 acres containing the existing residence. The sole purpose of this proposed lot split is to provide a single-family home building site for the construction of an ADA-compliant home for the applicant's daughter-in-law. Access to both resulting parcels would be provided by a shared driveway private access corridor. Because the access serves more than one property and the lots would have full frontage on a public street, the proposal is subject to city regulations governing driveway access, private streets, and subdivision platting. The applicant asserts that dedication of a full 66-foot easement is unnecessary because the abutting property east of the subject property is wetland and cannot be developed. Therefore, there is no need for a 66-foot wide public easement across the 2 new parcels and seeks relief through the waiver process. The land beyond the proposed access corridor, in fact, is significantly constrained by wetlands. The adjoining 40-acre parcel is identified on the National Wetland Inventory and is recognized by the city as possibly unbuildable. Portions of the subject property are also partially impacted by wetlands. Due to these constraints, there is no reasonable expectation that the access corridor would ever function as a public street serving any additional development. Under city standards, driveways that function as public access routes are typically required to be constructed within or encumbered by a 66-foot right-of-way easement consistent with local street design standards and long-term infrastructure planning objectives. City code and development standards require that driveways intended for public access be designed to city standard. Public access routes be protected by sufficient right-of-way or easement width to accommodate pavement, shoulders, drainage, utilities, and snow storage, allow for future reconstruction or upgrades, and protect public investment and access rights. The 66-foot width standard mirrors local street right-of-way standards and is intended to ensure long-term flexibility even when a roadway is initially constructed to a lesser width. The city council retains discretion to grant waivers when strict application of the standards is not necessary to meet the intent of the ordinance and when public safety, access, and infrastructure needs can still be adequately met. Under section 7A 800, the general provisions under property access establishes a minimum standard for property access. In the rural residential district, a lot with frontage on a public roadway may obtain access via a driveway provided specific conditions are met, including limitations on the number of lots served, construction and maintenance standards, and execution of a development agreement. Section 7A 800C6D further provides that for purposes of a lot width and access, a driveway approved under this provision shall be classified as a private street. Moving on to the definition, or actually section on private streets. Chapter 7A allows private streets in all applicable zoning districts when approved as part of a subdivision development. Section 7A 811 requires all owners of benefited properties enter into an agreement with the city that includes at a minimum approval of right-of-way easements as determined by the city attorney, utility or trail easements as determined by the city engineer, recording of agreements on the title, construction according to city standards, assignment of construction and maintenance costs to benefited property owners. Section 7A 811 does not prescribe a fixed easement width, leaving that determination to the city based on specific site-specific conditions. Under section 8701G, private streets, provides that private streets shall not be approved except as permitted under chapter 7A, and only after the benefited property owners enter into an agreement with the city addressing easements, construction standards, recording, and long-term maintenance responsibilities. Section 8-713 under lots requires that all lots take primary access from a public dedicated street or a street with legal status, except where specifically allowed under Chapter 7A, and Chapter 7A expressly allows private streets, therefore satisfying the requirement when properly approved. Section 8-713G requires that due regard be shown for natural features, including wetlands and drainage in any subdivision of land. Section 8-1001 establishes lot configuration as an administrative process and expressly provides that the city retains discretion to require subdivision platting where appropriate. Staff finds the proposal does not qualify as a lot reconfiguration because of those identified 4 factors in code. This proposal should be processed as a subdivision plat under Chapter 8 rules. The waiver does not apply to lot configuration requirements or platting approval. Based on staff analysis of code, the City Council has several policy and/or quasi-judicial options available for consideration. Number 1, you could act on the waiver request. The City Council may approve or deny the applicant's request for a waiver from the requirement to dedicate a full 66-foot wide right-of-way easement as presented, based on findings of fact and analysis contained in this report. Option 2, the City Council may determine that the shared access corridor should be classified as a private street pursuant to Section 7A 800C 6D, subject to the following conditions. All benefited property owners would enter into an agreement with the city. A reduced width access easement should be granted and recorded. Construction standards should be defined and enforced, and a long-term maintenance agreement responsibilities which are clearly assigned and recorded. Under this option, the City Council may approve a reduced easement width consistent with the intent of Chapter 7A and Chapter 8 while ensuring legal access, safety, and infrastructure protection. Option 3 is regardless of any action on the waiver request, the City Council may require the applicants to proceed through the subdivision platting process in accordance with Chapter 8 of the City Code. Based on the determination that the proposal exceeds the scope of an administrative lot reconfiguration and results in the creation of new buildable parcels, approval of a waiver does not constitute plat approval. And option 4 is a separate policy action. The City Council may direct staff to evaluate and draft zoning text amendments for future consideration, which would include amending Chapters 7 and 8 private street requirements to only apply to driveways or private roads which serve 3 or more parcels in the future. With that, the applicants are here, as well as your city attorney who has some in-depth knowledge and conversation on the waiver request that can answer any questions.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I just want to provide a little bit of context. This is the type of thing you'd normally see going through the Planning Commission. However, it's pretty standard practice when a waiver request under the subdivision ordinance comes in, it goes to the council. The reason for that is then that sets the stage for other applications. So if the council, which has the discretion to grant the waiver, decides to waiver some portion of the planning requirements, that informs the type of applications that will follow and will be processed through the Planning Commission and to the council. So this doesn't eliminate, as Mr. Berg said, the requirement to join these parcels, reconfigure these parcels. This is the first step to see if you're willing to waive to some extent the requirement for a full 66-foot right-of-way, because as Mr. Berg pointed out and as the applicant's attorney has pointed out, it's highly unlikely and improbable that a road's ever going to go through that wetland complex. The other thing that I want to point out that's unique about this application, and counsel for the applicant has described requirements for reasonable accommodation for those with disabilities. And I generally agree with the outline that has been put forward by the applicant's attorney. So that's something that you would take into consideration in this situation because of the disability. Is there a reasonable accommodation that the city can make that doesn't harm the public and doesn't create a burden on the city? That's ultimately your call, but I believe the law and the requirements are well stated in the supporting documentation. The little bit of background when we were discussing this with the applicant and the applicant's counsel, primarily through the applicant's counsel, when Eleanor was still with us, we wanted to find a path that would both serve the needs for access for the properties, but also address the need for accommodation. And so we suggested that this is pretty unusual. I don't think this council has dealt with a lot of waiver requests, but it's at least a legal vehicle that puts the question squarely in front of you. And then as Mr. Berg pointed out, you have a couple options. In the first instance, you just simply waive the requirement, or do we treat this as a private street? We believe we can get to the same place. The benefit of treating this as a private street, serving those lots, is that people can move, people can change addresses. We have to look at the long-term use of these parcels as they're created and developed and make sure there's something of record that clearly sets forth those rights of access. Having said that, we want to give the applicants an opportunity to address these questions, knowing that if there's any further questions from the council, this could be laid over for another cycle, 2 weeks, to come back with any answers that might be necessary for your decision making.
I have a quick question to you, Bill. So if we went through the planning commission, why isn't this a variance? Why is it a waiver?
Mr. Mayor and Council, that's a good question. It could certainly have proceeded as a variance. We were essentially working with the applicant to find a kind of a more streamlined way to get the question answered so they could then bring in their subsequent applications for subdivision. You're absolutely right. It's a very good question. It could have proceeded as a variance request. Again, these circumstances are pretty unique, and we wanted to find a way to answer the question by the council, given that it's paired with a reasonable accommodation request. That's not something that the Planning Commission has dealt with before. And frankly, some cities have that all laid out in ordinance. We don't. So we thought to answer the reasonable accommodation request, we would bring it forward to you as a waiver and let you address that portion of the request, and then they can make their subdivision application.
This is Jenny. Kind of relating to what the mayor asked, from what I hear, what I understand from what you're saying, this would potentially then open the door for the Planning Commission to review shared driveways in the future. Is that what I'm understanding? So that they would potentially be able to create or revise the situation in which we have now, right? Because right now, two people sharing a driveway have to have a 66-foot wide easement, is what I'm understanding.
A couple of mayor, council member, a couple of responses. Let's take these in separate buckets. Today we have up to 2 sites on a shared driveway. In the past, some of those requests to alter that have come, whether it's with or otherwise, have come as a variance request. This is the first time we've had a request coupled with a reasonable accommodation under federal disability law. And so that's why it's presented to you in this form. I don't know that it's precedent setting other than somebody also making a reasonable accommodation request. One of the things that we might consider is looking at other models, other ordinances that specifically some of the larger cities have that embedded in their ordinances. So it's already sorted based upon more frequent practice with reasonable accommodations requests. I think as a separate matter, Mr. Berg suggested that there may be a policy discussion completely separate from this about whether you want to go up to 3, because we've had that request in the past for up to 3 home sites off a driveway. I think that's separate and apart from the request that's in front of you tonight.
Thank you for clarifying.
Sure. So I think we're done as staff. If the mayor wants to entertain comments from the applicant.
Yes, we'll take comments from, if you want to make a statement or.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is David Schenko. I'm an attorney from DeWitt in Minneapolis. I represent Heidi, Chad, Justin, and Drew Lemire. With me tonight is Heidi, Chad, and Justin. Drew Lemire unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, and she is the person, she is the individual with a disability, and one of the 2 reasons for this request, the first being the waiver, the second being reasonable accommodation under the ADA and the FHAA. Before I go into the boring legal reasons, I would like my client Heidi to kind of discuss the practical reasons for this request.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I think most of you are familiar with the reason behind the request because we have, met with several of you and come before different meetings and Planning Commission in the past. But my son, to the right of me here, Justin, is married to a lovely girl named Drew, who just turned 28 years old. And she is a mom of an 18-month-old little girl, and unfortunately has a progressive neurological disease called spinal balear ataxia type 11. This is a genetic condition, and it will progress over her life. Ironically, just today, I took her to the eye doctor to help with her vision a little bit, and it occurred to me how much help she needed just taking the small flight of steps down in Town Square in Forest Lake today in Dr. Barr's office. And it just reinforces the need for her to be able to have accessible home. I also am a nurse by trade, a registered nurse, and I'd like to have my daughter-in-law nearby to help with her care into the future. Our family has been on the property for nearly 130 years. My dad, back in the back of the room here, still lives on his property, which is adjacent behind us, and one property over on the side. So to say that they might be some moving in the future is not real likely. We've been there a long time. We're kind of in our dream spot. So we have no intention of that. There's absolutely no intention of building, and probably no possibility of building in the wetland. And we'd really like to see option one be the decision that the council makes tonight. It's an emotional thing for us, and so we're hoping to see you guys make that choice. Was there anything else? It's okay.
To address a couple of the issues that the city attorney had talked about, we are requesting a waiver, which is a procedural allowance within your city code. So there was discussion about why waiver. The answer is because we can, and this has made a lot of sense to bring this to the council quickly so we can talk about how we go forward. And we believe a waiver should be granted, and again, option one, that was presented by the city staff, in that there's really no reason for a 66-foot wide public street. There's no, I think, chance of development beyond the current home owned by Heidi and Chad Lemire. There's a wetland that butts very close to their house, and then the 20 acres beyond it's all pure wetland. So a 66-foot wide street would be very difficult to accommodate in how you calculate the street and setbacks from the street. And the fact that you would likely take that out of if you had a 66-foot wide street over the length of this long driveway, it really changes how you can develop the lot. Because if you have a 5-acre minimum lot size and you have to subtract out of it a 66-foot wide street, and then you have setbacks from the street, then you have almost no building envelope to put a home because it's a very long, narrow lot. The second reason has to do with a reasonable accommodation under the Federal Fair Housing Amendments Act, known as the FHAA, and then the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA. Both of which kind of work in concert and require local zoning authorities such as cities and townships and counties to make reasonable accommodations in their zoning when there's a person with a disability and certain criteria are met. Basically, there's not a big burden on the city. And here there would be no burden on the city. All you would have to do is let us grant the waiver. We can build the homes. Obviously, there's a process in order to get the permitting. But we're just asking to not have to dedicate 66-foot wide right-of-way along a very lengthy driveway. Because again, it would basically render the lot unbuildable and allow a person with a disability the place where they want to live, which is the requirement under both the FHA and the ADA. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we would request respectfully that the city go with option one.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just a clarification between option one and option two. I think they essentially get to the same place. I think if the council decides that it wants to, I mean, we would not be recommending a 66-foot right-of-way in any case. So just to clarify that point as staff. Second, if you decide to go with option one, which is that's your determination and discretion, we would require, as a condition of that approval, that there be an access easement, because we want to make sure that they can meet the requirement for public access from a public street. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that before this is all said and done, and there's a subdivision process that they have to follow still, that there's an easement that provides permanent access rights to those resulting parcels. So again, whether you go with option one and we call it an access easement, or you go with option two and we call it a private street, it really gets to the same place. And I think the concern, as I heard it from our council before the meeting, is they don't want to have a concern with setbacks from a private street and those sorts of things. So perhaps, certainly from the applicant's position, option one is the easiest, the least burdensome. But I want to make it clear for the record, because there's a process that's going to be followed after tonight. on the subdivision request, that as a part of this action and as a part of that action, there will be a requirement that the property be burdened with an access easement so that we can make sure that now and in the future, all lots have a right to access from the street. That makes sense.
I got a question since we're not going through the planning commission. I just have I don't know, I was on the planning commission for, 6 years or whatever, and I look at it, Bill, and I think that, can we have a public hearing on this? I'm just looking at the idea, what does the public say about this?
Mr. Mayor and Council, there's not a public hearing requirement for the waiver, so you are required to make a decision either tonight or at a subsequent meeting on this request. And so we don't have the ability to insert a public hearing requirement where one is not provided in our ordinance or in statute.
And then the second question, I want to bounce off of what Jenny said about precedents. What are we setting here in the future? I mean, do we have to go back and start looking at our ordinances on private roads and this whole policy we have?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I would say the precedent that's being set is because this comes in the context of a reasonable accommodation request, something that we don't, I've been city attorney for a long time. This is the first reasonable accommodation request we've had in 30 years. So I'm not terribly concerned that we're setting a precedent. Certainly, the precedent would be that anybody with a disability should be treated the same under similar circumstances. So if that's a precedent, I think that's one we can live with. But I don't believe that it creates a precedent for just the run-of-the-mill driveway request. And I think, as Mr. Berg pointed out, you can have a policy discussion around that at one of your workshops. Deal with that as a separate matter.
I have one more question. Just looking at I agree with you, putting 66, I can agree about that. 66 foot is kind of pushing it. But that 40 acres you got back there, that's the wetlands. Is my math wrong? Are you making 2 lots out of this whole thing, or is there going to be 3? Is there going to be more of that 40 acres in the back, the wetland, that's going to be split off?
So the 40 acres that is in the back is owned by my dad right now, and the intention is to split that one time between him and us.
And the 20 acres would go on to their lot, and then the other 20 acres that I will still own would be a separate lot. There would be there'd still only be 2 tax parcels. But
This will require replatting. It's going to be it's going to make.
So that property though back there, it would be accessible? Is it accessible to your property?
Yes.
It is?
His side, yeah, over on your end, right?
Okay. So we're not landlocking that piece of property? So
It's been considered, except for the last few years, it's been considered village property. We've been there for 130 years.
I understand that. I see, I know where you're coming from. I've been back there.
That's Rice Creek runs down the end of it.
Right. But I just wondered what, when you do this.
There's an easement on my property that goes back there.
Okay.
When I built my house in 76, there was an easement that went back
So your property does touch this that 40 acres?
there.
Right. Okay. And so does yours, Heidi, right? Yours back.
Their family owned the 2 40s back to back. The front 40 is where buildings are now. And the back 40 is the one we're going to split up. But they're right east and west of each other. I mean, they split up all the way across.
I thought I was looking at the map and I thought some of that was owned by the Rice Creek, or is it the parks, or no?
I own 40 acres behind me.
Okay, but not 2 40s. Okay, all right. Anybody else have any questions?
This is Karen. Are you guys currently sharing a driveway then with Dad? No? So you do have separate driveways for each property?
He's 2 lots north of us.
Yeah, he's a 2 lot north of us. There's a property between us.
When my folks died, none of our family wanted piece of property. So at that point in time, we went through all of the subdividing business, we got everything taken care of for that front 40. It was divided into 5 lots. My lot was in the northeast corner of that 40 that runs along Furman Street. But I didn't have any road frontage, because that's the way it worked back in '76. And then when we developed it, then we changed my lot so I would have road frontage. And then there was 4 more lots. Heidi's lot was the original family housing home. And then we sold 3 other lots. So there's 5 lots on that 40.
So will the shared driveway then be able to access to Dad's place?
No.
No. Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
No, there's a property between us and him.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, may I? Yes. The current home owned by Heidi and her husband is currently serviced by a narrow driveway that runs the length of their 8-acre parcel. It's my understanding that there would be no change to the driveway or its location or its width. It would still be there. The only difference is that there'd be a house closer to the road on 5 acres of land. So we're not talking about changing really anything. It's just the driveway would then branch off like to the left as you're entering it, go to the new home, and then just continue straight to the current home. And it would not access any other parcels. And to address council's concerns about a private easement, I certainly concur. I handle a lot of easement and access issues in my daily life, and it would certainly be very smart for the parties to enter into a private easement agreement and how they handle maintenance, use, and because at some point someone else might own the property and it makes sense that they will enter into that. The reason option 2 is less desirable is that under option 2, it appears that the private street would have to conform to city standards. And if it has to conform to city standards for, whether it's paved and have gutter, then we're talking about a fairly expensive proposition for someone wanting to build a small house that's, 1 story for accessibility purposes. So that's why we respectfully request option 1.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just another point that I think is important here. Under our shared driveway ordinance, there may be additional requirements on the driveway. Generally, I think it's, I can't remember the width, but it's larger than a driveway typically because it has to provide adequate services, public services, whether it's ambulance, police, fire, 16 feet. So those are the types of things that will come through the subdivision process.
Before my mom passed away, the ambulance been in there dozens of times.
It's all right. It still has to meet the requirements for a shared driveway.
And yeah, never got stuck either.
That's a good bit of history. Thank you.
This is Jenny. Can I, Aaron, can you pull up the concept plan? I just have a question about your update. Did you update the concept plan in terms of what that looks like? Because I know some of us were at the Planning Commission meeting. I think Councilmember Bush was the liaison at the time. The original concept plan had divided your properties a little bit differently, and that was a major concern in terms of the property width and what abutted the road. And now we're looking at really one property being west and one property being more east. Is that correct? So one is full road frontage and the other is setback.
Correct.
So can you remind me, is it 240? How wide is that? It's exactly 220 wide.
That's the minimum requirement.
No, how wide is theirs currently? Do you remember how wide your lot is at the road now?
I don't remember, but I think David's looking.
And if not, that's okay. I just remember that was a major, one of the major concerns with the Planning Commission at that time. And so this does change that quite a bit as well, just having this different concept, because if you look right there, perfect. Thank you, Aaron.
Hey, Jenny, Jim just pulled it up. It's 230 feet.
230 feet.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jim.
thank you, Jim. So with that original plan, they had one property would have sat more north and then one more south, and then they really didn't have the width for either property, but this new concept does change that as well. And so I think just to make sure that we all had that update, I noticed that when I was reading through, but it was was not something that was mentioned, so I just wanted to make sure we all saw that as well.
Sir, you're going to have to come up to the microphone at some point to record your statement.
Tell them what the change in the point frontage that you planned out.
Was this the neighbor?
This just seemed like a better concept once we started talking to David.
From Kevin,
Yeah.
point frontage?
Yeah.
So you're not buying,
No,
you're not buying the property to the north of you?
we are not.
And if I'm right, that property had a septic system that kind of messed up a few things too, right?
Yeah, we didn't really travel down that concept too far after we got David involved, so.
I think that's where you're coming from, Jenny.
Yeah, so having this change also does change some of the original issues that the planning commission did. And obviously, we're coming from more of an ADA perspective, and there are other perspectives, but I just wanted to note that this change also does suffice some of the concerns that the planning commission had originally.
So you have the frontage for the road.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yes, and that was the point of making these changes, that it made more sense, and then rather than having to do, land swaps with neighbors to get the additional frontage, this made it a lot cleaner. Then you'd have one lot on the road and then one lot behind it, and then you have a shared driveway with the easement. So the kind of the landlocked parcel isn't landlocked because they'd have access via the easement.
Mr. Mayor, I just have a question too. Again, following up on the Planning Commission meeting, I was also there. If I'm recalling that correctly, did not the Commissioner Robin address the 66-foot need for the driveway at that Planning Commission and actually talk about a potential variance, even though I don't think it was voted on? Or am I not remembering that correct?
This was formally in front of them. I think this was informally in front of them for a conversation. I don't think they had any formal action because the applicants have not applied for a variance, so we wouldn't have even had a hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, to my knowledge, it was just kind of a concept, correct? And you were trying to get our feedback and,
okay.
Yeah.
And actually, we were told at the planning commission about that variance, it was pretty much a flat no, that a variance would not be granted, so.
Informally.
We got.
Informally.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
And that's what I'm remembering then. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
And I think at that point, Scott, is just like, there's got to be a way to get this done. Let's go back to the drawing board. And I think we put it in city staff's hands, in which Bill and Aaron, Jack, and their council work together. So thank you for that. It's kind of the outcome I was hoping to look for as a creative solution to come up, this isn't every day that somebody comes with a hardship to us. And it's up to us as a city to help out our residents, right? And I think that's what we're doing here. It's just coming up with which one of these two options are we okay with, right? I know there's probably some angst around going around the planning commission, but this is a very different thing than we're used to, right? And I don't say we're going around them. I shouldn't have said it that way, right?
I want to clarify that this waivers always come directly to the council, at least in our past practice, so.
Right, so we're not really going around the planning commission. We're utilizing rules that we have to work with, right? So.
Which is why I asked for clarification on a variance.
Yeah, no, thank you, Scott.
And Bill, maybe you can, if you're done, Councilmember Bush, I just have a question for Bill. So I've scoured the zoning code. I cannot find a spot where it specifically states that a private street, once it's declared a private street by the council, counts against the lot. I cannot find that anywhere. Now, an easement wouldn't necessarily count against the lot under the terms of an easement. However, a right-of-way would, if it was declared a right-of-way. This language says easement right-of-way, or right-of-way easement. Now, we have easements that encapsulate properties all over for drainage and or utility purposes, and we don't count that against the property as width. So maybe interpretation is key in this conversation, is that if, for instance, option 2 were to be considered and we required a 12-foot wide right-of-way easement dedicated for future use, and it never gets developed by the city because we know that beyond there's no future development needs, but it meets the ordinance. It doesn't count against the property width. and the city gets guaranteed utilities through there if need be in the future. You guys, between yourselves, work out the agreement for maintenance. It gets recorded, gets replatted. In the future, when we all pass and move on, the next planner down the road that has to argue with the next property owner and the next property owner over who has rights and access when somebody wants to cut somebody off because the neighbors aren't getting along anymore. Believe it or not, that does happen. It's happened, and I've been in the middle of disputes between property owners from family divisions in the 1900s over access. And so some of that is also protection and gives the city some security too. So, and I think I identified that under option 2, there's a bunch of avenues for determining the width in that dedication. Doesn't necessarily have to be 66 feet.
Mr. Mayor and Council, just to respond, that's why I said, really, when it comes down to it, option 1 is not that different than option 2. Option 2 is not that different than option 1, because whether you call it a private street or a private access, driveway, you result in the same thing. We have private driveways. Probably the best example that you're familiar with is St. Clair Lakes. That comes off of a public street, which then turns into a private drive for the development. There it served multiple home sites, multiple new homes. Utilities are provided. It's actually served by public utilities underneath the street. I believe it runs in that corridor. So that's the kind of concept that typically would utilize a private street. Personally, I'm going to say I think you can go either way. And if the property owners have a preference for option 1 and there isn't a future harm to the city, then perhaps that's the route you take. Just to kind of simplify this. As stated, though, we want to make sure that through the subdivision process, the driveway meets our private driveway requirements. It's a sufficient width. There's agreement how it's going to be maintained, all of those considerations. As outlined in the staff report, you could go with the private street. Then we would be addressing the kind of issues that Mr. Berg brought up. I haven't scoured the zoning code, so I don't know whether that easement, that private driveway would count against the lot area, for instance, or the lot width.
Mr. Mayor, may I address the council? Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the reason that I recommended to my clients that we look at option 1 as opposed to a private street is in reading the code, I found that it was unclear to me, so in my opinion, there was maybe some ambiguity as to whether it was really a private street or whether there was some sort of a public interest in it. The terms a right-of-way easement, to me, I do a lot of right-of-way easements, means that it's a public street. And that's where I'm concerned that it may accidentally be construed as a public street as opposed to some sort of private interest. And then you start having lot width problems because now it's public, and now you subtract out the width of the street or the width of the driveway from the lot width requirements. And that's why we're recommending and requesting that we go with option 1, so we don't have potential future issues with whether or not the code is calling it a right-of-way, which, again, we can talk to MnDOT all day about right-of-ways, that's a public issue, versus what's just a private easement.
I look at this, you're very well versed in it, and so is Bill, but you talk about being confused. If you got 1 and 2 and they're both the same, no, they're not. They're both 1 and 2. I'm kind of confused on that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe.
Well, I'll just tell you, having listened to the discussion, my recommendation, we talked about this with Eleanor. We suggested they come in, given the reasonable accommodation request, with a waiver of platting requirements. So that's what's in front of you. The staff have outlined other options. We are required in any application as a city to approve or deny. So if that helps, the applicant has made a request for option 1. And the only way we get to option 2 is if the applicant defers to that recommendation, and we have some discussions about how that would work. So the simplest thing to think about is option 1 is on the table. Option 2 is an alternative. you as city council owe the applicant a decision on what they've requested, which is option one.
Tonight?
It doesn't have to happen tonight. If you have concerns, if you want us to investigate further, you can lay this over for a 2-week cycle, but if the majority of you are comfortable moving forward, then you can take that vote tonight.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Scott, if I may. I think if we table this, make a motion to table this to February 25th, it would give me and maybe the rest of us that need it the opportunity to individually go meet with staff and council and be less confused about it. I would appreciate the opportunity to do that.
Anybody else? Jenny, you have any comment?
This is Jenny. I mean, I think going from the planning commission and being through that process with this family, I think the biggest thing for them is their ADA compliance. And I want to be respectful of their time as well, as I believe and understand from at least last year that they were hoping to build at some point this year. So I feel like putting this off, I mean, if there's additional research to be done and everybody feels like you want that extra 2 weeks, then I won't fight against that, but I feel comfortable moving forward and taking a vote.
Well, this is Karen. Just to be clear, so we could look at option one, but we could put restrictions on option one as well, right?
You can require reasonable conditions. Some of those reasonable conditions would be the requirement for an access agreement, access easement and agreement that would combine maintenance. That would also come up as a condition of subdivision approval, because the subdivision approval will be based upon private driveway access if you approve option one. So whether or not you condition that action tonight, I think that's a good thing to do, and I can give you that condition. But it would come up again in the subdivision request. So whether or not you condition your action tonight, the subdivision request would have that condition. But I can give you the condition that I would recommend, which is that approval of the waiver is subject to a condition for an access easement agreement and a maintenance agreement for the driveway.
Which would be no problem for us, no problem.
Well, and in addition to that, like you mentioned with the 16-foot driveway, and then we also talked about the easement. What kind of easement would we be looking at in that situation?
It would be an access easement that would benefit the properties that are taking access. It would burden the properties over which the easement runs. But you could state it exactly as I stated, that the waiver of platting be conditioned upon the grant of an access easement and a maintenance agreement for the private driveway.
And how many feet would the access agreement be?
It's 16 feet, but that again would be, that would come through the subdivision process. So this condition would make sure that the waiver that's granted tonight is subject to that easement, but also the same issue and condition would come up in the subdivision process. Because we have requirements for a private drive within our code, those would be operable on this application when it comes through the Planning Commission.
It is 16 feet on each side of the driveway, or is it 8 feet on each side of the driveway?
It's a 16-foot total. So from center line, it would be 8.
8 and 8?
8 and 8.
Okay.
Bob, you got anything?
No, Mayor.
Do you feel like a vote, or do you?
Yeah, I'd be fine on voting with it tonight.
Well, we got Jenny, you, and what about you, Karen? Do you want to vote on it? Do you want a couple weeks to think about it? Or?
I think I'm okay.
Okay, which way? Okay.
I think I'm okay to
Make a decision?
make a decision based on what our attorney is advising to us.
This is Jenny. I'm going to make a motion. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so don't mind my voice tonight. This is Jenny. Based on our council's information, I move to approve the waiver request to grant an access easement and maintenance agreement for the private driveway located at 14561 Furman Street. And that would be clarifying option one.
Would you cross out 65, 66 on there then? Or that's already etiquette, all right, I see.
Yes, including.
And then 16 would be in the subdivision then, okay.
And including what Bill had mentioned, Jenny, as far as the conditions go?
Yes, so subject to the conditions of the access easement agreement and maintenance agreement as provided by our council.
So we got a motion on the floor. Anybody want to second it?
It's Rob, I'll second.
Got a motion, and it's been seconded. Any other discussion? Any questions? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Jenny?
Jenny, aye.
Scott, aye.
Karen, aye.
Rob, aye.
And Ron, aye. Motion passes. It's a start, another start.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming today.
Good, item 5 on the agenda tonight, letter of support, Rice Creek Wash Water Main, why am I having a WMA?
Watershed?
Watershed, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. On January 20th, 2026, the city of Columbus received a formal correspondence from Anoka County Administrator Jim Dickinson notifying the city of a vacancy on the Rice Creek Watershed District Board of Managers. The vacancy resulted from the resignation of Steve Wagaman, effective January 10th, 2026. Mr. Wagaman's term was scheduled to expire January 17th of 2028. The Rice Creek Watershed District is organized and governed under Minnesota statute, Chapter 103D, and functions as a watershed management organization responsible for protecting and managing water resources within its jurisdiction. The Rice Creek Watershed District Board of Managers is composed of eligible residents appointed by the Anoka County Board of Commissioners. Anoka County is accepting applications, or was accepting applications, from eligible residents within the watershed boundaries through February 3rd, 2026. Following review of submitted applications, the Anoka County Board of Commissioners is scheduled to make an appointment to fill the vacancy on February 17th for the remainder of Mr. Wagaman's unexpired term. Although not required, the appointment process allows municipalities or local units of government within the Rice Creek Watershed District to submit letters of support for individuals seeking appointment to the Board of Managers. Letters of support are advisory in nature and provide the Anoka County Board of Commissioners with additional local perspective. The city has received a formal request from Columbus resident Janet Hagland to provide her with a letter of support. Staff recommend that the council consider directing the mayor and the city administrator to sign the drafted letter of support and submit it to the Anoka County Board of Commissioners related to the Rice Creek Watershed District Board of Managers vacancy as presented in attachment number 2.
Thank you, Aaron. Just a little insight on this. Janet has already interviewed with them, and there were 7 other, I believe, applicants. And I believe that Janet was the only one that asked for a letter of support from the city. And I'm not sure, but I think she's the only one from the city of Columbus that applied. So they can apply from anywhere in the county, like Ham Lake. They could apply to be on it or whatever. But we've had Pat Priner on it prior to Steve Wagaman. And I just think it's best that if we have somebody on that board that's from our city, they'll keep us more advised on what's going on with the watershed, that big area in our place. So that's why I can make a motion here, unless anybody has.
Yeah, I got a question. How do we know that Janet was the only person that applied for that position? Because I've seen nothing except her letter of recommendation. I don't know who might have. I've heard that other people had from the city of Columbus applied for that and interviewed for it.
So, Councilmember Bush, I can let you know that I did reach out to the executive assistant to Mr. Dickinson and say, hey, what is the process? How's this work? Are the local units of government notified that there's been a resident that has applied within there so that we have an opportunity? And the response I got back was it's up to the individual applicant to approach the city for the letter of support.
Gotcha.
So if someone else from our city did apply but didn't come to the city requesting support, we would have no idea that they applied.
Gotcha.
Under the filling of an unexpired vacancy. if it's a end of term and then a reappointment or a future appointment for a full term, there's a different procedure. And I learned that through this process as well, that filling the unexpired term is a little bit different than filling a full term.
So if whoever fills this term, there'll have to be another appointment at the end of this.
At the end of this expired term, it'll start over and there'll be an opportunity for the city to then submit 3 names according to that other process.
Okay.
I think it's almost like our planning commission. Every 3 years, they have to apply again. So.
This is Jenny. I do know one resident reached out and let me know that he did interview as well. I did ask if he reached out to the city, and he said he did not. He had gotten information back from the watershed, but he had not. I don't know if he wasn't given that information, but also didn't know. But he did let me know he interviewed as well, but had not requested any kind of formal action from the city. So just noting that we at least had 2 Columbus residents.
All right.
But that was just based on a phone call I received, so.
I don't even think they would give us a list of who applied, would they?
Not under the filling of the unexpired or a short term. If it's a full cycle appointment, I think they let us know. We have then an opportunity to submit three names from 3 candidates.
And maybe that's where I was confused from the last go around when we reappointed Steve, right?
Right.
Yeah.
As I was preparing, I was reading through past letters of support, and I kept finding that there were the city submitting 3 names. So I just finally reached out to Jim's assistant and said, "What's going on with this? Tell me what's happening." And that's where I learned that there's a difference between a full term and a resignation partial term.
I think we had a problem too, didn't we, Rob? We never could get 3. We always had 2 or something.
Yeah, I think we ended up, a couple people just threw their names in, not really wanting it, just to make sure we had 3. It's kind of how it felt, right? Like,
yeah.
They kind of backed out after.
Last year, when Mr. Wagaman was reappointed, as Aaron said, the city could have submitted 3 names, but we did not get 3, so we just submitted 1 since Steve is reapplying for an existing position. And there is 2 more years, approximately 2 years left on that term, so in 2 years, there'll be another vacancy on that seat. Plus, there may be some other vacancies that come up too with some of the other members. I think they're staggered terms like we have here at City Council.
Oh, isn't it another watershed that has a couple openings?
Coon Creek has 2 openings.
Yeah.
Now, remember,
Sunrise.
no, Coon Creek is very little. We have really no projects in Coon Creek because most all of Coon Creek Watershed District is Carlos Avery in the city of Columbus. There's a little bit of area on the far western edge of Pine Street and some of that area down there, but that's the extent of any type of development that we have. So I think on that, Jenny, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when you served as liaison, I don't think you had too many Columbus projects that ever came up.
We had one incident that was kind of a split over off of Jodrell Street there off Pine, because this property bordered both. Beyond that, I think that was the only Columbus-related issue. And they may have some things that come up with the DNR, but it's very few and far between.
Any other comments, questions? Well, I'll make the motion. I, Ron Hanegraaff, move to approve and submit a letter of support for the Anoka County Board of Commissioners for Janet Hegland's appointment for the Rice Creek Water Management District Board of Managers vacancy.
Scott, I'll second.
We got a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Any other comments or questions? Having none, we'll go to a vote. Jenny?
Jenny, aye.
Scott, aye.
Aaron, aye.
Rob, nay.
Ron, aye. The motion passes. Item number 6, 2025 financial report. Information only, no action. You got the floor, Cheryl.
All right. So I was asked to
draft a general overview, a preliminary overview of 2025. I want to stress that. We still have expenditures coming in. We still have revenue coming in. We are in the middle stages of our audit, so there will be changes to our final numbers as always. So it just provided an overview of the city's financial performance and position. We are remaining in our stable financial condition. Revenues and expenditures are generally aligning with our adopted budget. There may be some areas where we have underspent, some where we've overspent, but they are generally within our normal constraints. We are of a conservative fiscal mindset, and we are continuing to monitor all of the economic conditions that support the city's ability to maintain our service levels while preserving our revenue. So our total revenue for fiscal year 2025 was a little over 5.9 million, and that represents approximately 114% of the budget. I pointed out some of the revenue trends, and I have an explanation of why it appears that we are over on our revenue. I don't know if you want me to go into the detail or if you've already read the report. The same thing with our expenditures. Our expenditures, we are at approximately 90% of our budget. However, we are expecting a large bill from the Forest Lake Fire Department shortly. We have estimated that bill to be $218,300. We are still going to be receiving billing from various vendors throughout the first quarter of this year, but we expect our expenditures to be under or at our budget. I also included a copy of our cash fund balance report for your review. And our financial outlook is we are going to be maintaining the same fiscal mindedness. We will always look at revenue trends, what pressures and economic conditions that may impact our future budgets. But our position remains strong, and the final fiscal year 2025 financial information will be available after the audit is complete, and we expect that to occur sometime in June. And I'm open if you have any questions.
Any questions?
I had a question. This is Karen. Just a question. Is the Forest Lake Fire Department at 218.3, is that like a normal amount every year that we pay?
Yes, that is our budgeted amount.
Do we have that money saved, or do we depreciate that, or how do we pay that?
So that is actually for their personnel expenses. That is separate from any capital expenditures that would occur. That is just to pay for personnel services and any gear that they would need for the year.
Okay, so we're expensing it monthly for that expense? I mean, are we depreciating it, or, I mean, how are we paying? I mean, do we have the money saved, or?
So we levy property taxes to pay for that.
Oh, I got it. Okay, okay. And then the vendors for 2025 that we have that are still coming in, are those before the quarter?
Yes.
Okay.
And some of those are included. I'm sorry, what?
When do you think they'll all be in? I mean,
usually by the end of the first quarter.
Okay.
If I'm correct, the fire department, Forest Lake pays, what, 80%? And we pay 20%.
Yes.
So that's how it works out.
Okay.
So when they do their budget, we know what our 20% is going to be. Any other questions, Cheryl?
Ms. Jenny, I have a budget adjacent question. How is everything going with the Lakes Area TV? I know you just took that on. Did you have, I know we talked about potentially before, so I just wanted to know, because starting in 2026, that's falling under your bucket, I believe, correct? Okay.
We've had some challenges with the software and our new IT setup. But overall, I mean, any kind of transition is going to have its hiccups. I would say nothing to, be considered major. As we go through the first probably 6 months. We'll figure out our process, figure out how to create and make things more efficient, create better processes. But overall,
So you shared with me too, payday was yesterday and they got paid.
Yes.
So it's going good.
Good news. Thank you.
Any other questions?
This is Karen. I just have one more, Cheryl. I know we have some money saved for our future building expenses. Are we adding more to that fund this year?
Yes.
Okay.
We had cut money out of our general city capital fund for the prior 3 years. And this year, when we were working on setting the budget, we set a target of, I believe, $80,000, and we're trying to start building that account again.
Okay. Just curious.
So our goal was to get back to where we were in 2023, so that would be an allocation. We were putting in $115,000 a year in that account.
Okay.
No other questions? Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Go on to item number D, consultants, liaisons, staff reports. And we get to go to Brian right off the bat.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Brian Bachmeyer, Consulting City Engineer. I was just going to provide a verbal report on information we recently received from the soil boring contractor as we continue to do our due diligence on the potential water tower site at the corner of Gander Drive and West Freeway Drive. They were out the first week of January and did the deep borings, and they were scheduled to come back the second week of January to do the shallower borings. But due to the extremely cold weather that we had for that 3-week period, they have not scheduled the return trip on the shallow borings. They are making arrangements now to come in to finish up on their shallower borings. But we did get the preliminary results on the deep borings, and what they're indicating is in the upper 10 to 12 feet, there is loose sands in the upper 10 to 12 feet, and below that, there's firm to stiff sandy clay material down to 65 feet when they hit refusal with the cone penetrating boring machine. So the recommendation they have based on this information is they would like to go deeper. They would like to go down to 70 feet beyond the refusal point to determine what's below that point of refusal and do additional testing on that material to make sure that we don't have, that we have suitable settlement, that we don't have excessive settlement in the soils underneath the water tower. The one thing we also want to avoid is the need for borings, piling to go down to the bedrock, because that would be an extremely expensive alternative if we had to go to piling. So the recommendation is to do one additional boring, basically take one of the 15-foot borings and make that a 70-foot boring. And the estimated additional cost is about $4,690 to go that additional depth for that and do the additional testing that would need to be done on that material. I guess we're looking to the council support on that. We think it's reasonable and appropriate because obviously we would prefer to do a spread footing, shallow spread footing, as opposed to having to resort to piling. With that, I'd stand for any questions the council may have.
I got one question. What's the word refusal?
Refusal?
Yeah.
With the cone penetrating boring, it goes down to the point where they cannot push it any further. So it's a point of refusal. So they hit firm material at 65 feet. They hit material that's firm, but they want to see if they can, how much further they can go down, and that would require just standard penetration boring, which is the auger type. They would go down below that point of refusal.
Interesting. I didn't know what to, it's looking good though, the property?
Well, it's marginal for the spread footing. We want to have a high degree of confidence that we're going to be able to use a spread footing. And so that's why the recommendation is to do this additional depth boring in that area. We don't want to have to go to piling because piling is expensive.
We had a discussion with that, and I sent you that everybody that information today in an email, but the spread footing is a cheaper way to do that, and it would provide stability, assuming the soil conditions are suitable underneath that. If we had to go to pilings, Brian said could possibly cost around $300,000 to do that. The property was appraised at $360,000, so if we find out that these soils are unsuitable for spread footings without pilings, we may have to look at an alternative site for the water tower. We do have two that were previously identified, but we were pretty sure that the second one, which is up around our well house 2 and 3, has the same similar soil conditions. The third one that was identified is on a site that's very small, far north of there, and is from a hydraulic standpoint and an extension of other utilities is going to cost us about as much. So if this is why I think it's important to exhaust this last possibility on this last drill request, to hope we get some good information back on that and ensure that spread footings could be put in only for the tower and eliminate the eventuality of us having to look for another property for that.
I understand what pilings are, but the spread, is that just like throwing sand down? And
A spread footing?
yeah.
Well, that would be where they would use a kind of a wide base at the bottom and then put the footing on top of that. But it would be a concrete slab on the bottom that would go around the perimeter, and then the footing would sit on that. So that's a spread footing.
Okay.
And that would generally be only 15 feet deep, instead of where piling would have to go down 100 feet.
That spread footing can carry the weight of the whole water tower?
Yes, if the soils are suitable and there isn't excessive settlement. And the criteria is very narrow for a water tower. You have to have less than 2 inches of settlement on the slab. So it's a pretty narrow restriction on the allowable settlement, because you do have pipes coming into the foundation from the side, so you really have to limit how much settlement there is in that foundation.
Mayor, if I could, to Brian, so what's the chances that you hit point of refusal, we begin to bore again, and then hit soft ground again? There might just be a vein of rock or something of that nature, and then we're going to hit soft soil again. That could be a possibility, right?
The soundings that they had, they were able to determine the bedrock is down below, and it seemed like there was consistent material from 65 feet and down.
Sure.
So they just want to go down that extra 15 feet, basically, or 20 feet, I guess it is. They want to go down 20 feet to determine if it gets stiff enough that'll minimize the amount of settlement.
Okay.
In that 15 to 20 feet.
Sure. Thank you.
Well, do we have to make a motion on this, Jack?
We'd like to go ahead and process this so they can go ahead with this. So I think the motion would be to approve the additional boring at the price that Brian recommended, so we can get this going and keep this moving, so we can at least be working on the site acquisition for a future water tower site.
Anybody want to make a motion, or I'll make it?
I can make it. How much was it, Brian?
$4,690.
This is Scott. I make a motion to approve the spending of an additional soil boring for the water tower site in the amount of $4,690.
This is Karen. I'll do the second on that
Motion on the
motion.
floor, it's been seconded. Any discussion? Any questions? Hearing none. Go to a vote. Jenny?
Jenny, aye.
Scott, aye.
Karen, aye.
Bye-bye.
And Ron, aye. The motion passes. Anything else, Brian?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you. Next one is City Attorney, Bill.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Order in the court. Hold it down. Mayor and City Council report. Jenny, you have anything?
For my city, I have a few other things under D, but I think for my city council, the only thing I had noted was that a resident noted that our state flag appeared a bit tattered, and I know the mayor and I had talked about that a bit, about talking with Public Works about potentially just replacing that flag. Beyond that, I didn't have anything to report, but will in the next few numbers.
Scott, do you have anything?
No report.
Aaron?
This is Karen. I have a meeting March 24th between 2 to 3 for the watershed-based implementation funding, and I also have a meeting April 27th between 4 and 6 for the Lower St. Croix Partnership meeting in the Wyoming Library, at the Wyoming Library.
Thank you. Rob, do you have anything?
Only thing I have to report, last meeting I was absent, had influenza B, so I found that out. I was driving home from work that night, so I decided to go to the clinic instead of come to here, so that's why I missed last meeting. So just wanted that on the record. That's all.
And my report, well, I'm going to take number 4 and number 5. And that's for you, Brian, back there, if you're videotaping, because last time we had some. EDA report, we have none tonight. We do have a meeting coming up in the future, up on February 19th of next week. Item number 5, the park board report. We did have a park board meeting last night, and Brad Norling was elected again as chairman. Andrea Messina was the deputy chairman. They were voted in. They did talk about a little library box at the park. That was from Gina and the Lions Club putting it in there, and they were all for that. It'd be by the playground equipment and stuff like that. They also met with 3 members of the Forest Lake Area Fast Pitch Association about the dugouts, and that's on course. And there's another meeting coming up the 24th of March where we hope this all comes together and that the association will be giving us a check for $10,000 towards the dugouts to match. And somehow, President Matt Rivard thinks that we can do all 3 fields with $20,000. So I guess we're going to see when that gets going. And other than that, there's not much more going on in the park board, and I have nothing more than that. We'll go on to item number 6. Is a planning commission report.
This is Jenny reporting on the February 4th Planning Commission. There were 3 items on the docket of note. One was Holiday on Lake Drive, over right off the freeway, had a CUP amendment request. They are looking to do a reconstruction as well as adding a car wash. So that would be new for Columbus. As well as improve landscaping. So that was approved. And then if I remember correctly, Aaron, will that be at our next council meeting? So that will be coming up at our next city council meeting. But that did have the support of the planning commission. We also had a family, I believe it's the Fayetteville Family Trust on 145th Avenue. This is kind of where they talked about that technology corridor. They're currently zoned general business. They have their land for sale. It is not selling. They have had it for sale, I believe, for a few years at this point, if I remember right from their conversation. They would like to be zoned light industrial. There has been interest in their land as light industrial, which is similar to the land south of their property. And so they are just looking for that change as well. And then the third was the discussion on commercial dog kennels. This was a general discussion that was more of a broad spectrum. What was the opinion of the Planning Commission in terms of allowing commercial dog kennels in the city of Columbus, but was not specific to any residents or their situations going on. And so I think for what that is, there was some back and forth and discussion on allowing for the potential of like hunting dogs and training and things like that. There was some support there, but then also really understanding what that looks like from a control perspective, compliance perspective. And so there was some concern on that side. And then if that were to be a CUP or an IUP, and there was some back and forth there. So it really was just left as a discussion and not pushed forward to the council, I don't believe. Aaron, yes. So it was just left more open. And that was really everything that the Planning Commission did discuss.
Thank you. We'll go on to item number 7, the Public Works.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
And we'll go to item number 8, the City Administrator's Report.
I've got two things, minor, both of them are good news. Today, we officially entered into a purchase agreement with Bel Air Development Corporation for the sale of 5.7 acres of city-owned property immediately adjacent to and north of Caribou Coffee for a potential 200-unit apartment project. Those documents were signed, delivered, and sent and received by the Development Corporation. They acknowledged the receipt of that. Copies were sent to the city attorney. So they have a year to do their due diligence, and hopefully maybe sometime in late 2027 or early 2028, we can see some groundbreaking there. The other item I'd like to mention is that the sale of the property directly across the street from that, which we have a purchase agreement with Mr. Stephen Saunders. He has indicated to me that they anticipate closing on that the end of this month or the first week in March. So those are two positive steps in getting some much needed retail development and some higher density residential development within the freeway corridor and only where water and sewer is. So those are two significant steps moving ahead with both those projects.
Oh, great. That's great news.
So let's hope the borings turn out, and then we'll have the trifecta, right?
Yeah.
No pressure, Brian.
Right.
We'll go on to item number E, announcements and reminders. President's Day holiday, city offices will be closed next Monday, February 16th, 2026. Planning Commission meeting, February 18th, 2026 at 6 p.m. And it's a special EDA meeting on February 19th, 2026 at 5 p.m. And our city council regular meeting will be February 25th, 2026 at 6 p.m. And should we remember, I think we all got to remember, what is it, April or March? We have that Columbus. Just looking. Yeah, it'd be April 23rd is 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. I know it's coming up, and that's why we're having a special EDA meeting to try and organize that a little more. And if I'm right, we did have another applicant that we may be interviewing for that. So other than that,
Mayor, question for you. Fire Board, is that the 26th of February, was it? You can get it to me after. It doesn't need to be on this. Okay.
I don't know, they keep moving that around.
I know we talked about it at that meeting, but I don't recall.
All right.
Any idea where Columbus is?
Where
Is it coming up, where it's going to be held?
It's held at Running East.
It is running, back at Running East. Okay.
Yeah. So with that, I'll make a motion for adjournment.
Second, Rob?
We got a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll go for a vote.
Jenny, aye.
Scott, aye?
And I.
Rob, aye.
And Ron, aye. Meeting is hereby closed at 8:05.